It is not a day of apologies for the Prime Minister. Speaking in Ottawa this morning, Justin Trudeau finally gave a detailed statement on the SNC-Lavalin controversy 4 weeks after the story first broke. He says he was unaware of an erosion of trust between officials in his office and former Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybould. Trudeau offered no apology, arguing he will always stand up for jobs, but there was no inappropriate pressure on Wilson-Raybould to seek a deferred prosecution agreement for SNC-Lavalin. All this before a winter storm diverted his plane to Iqaluit this afternoon, where he was scheduled to make a different apology. CBC's David Cochran has been on the SNC story from the start. He joins us now. David, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. This was supposed to be this morning in Ottawa a statement of contrition. Is that what we saw from the Prime Minister?
I think, to a degree, yes, but I think it was more an act of explanation than an act of contrition. You know, best described, I would say, as an expression of regret as to how things have played out. What was interesting is that this is the first time the Prime Minister has actually dedicated an event to responding to this ongoing controversy for the first time in a month, bringing a level of seriousness and urgency to it after responding to Jody Wilson-Raybould's resignation, standing in front of a bus in Winnipeg, and then trying to deal with Jane Philpott at a climate rally on Monday in Toronto. But so he came there to talk specifically about SNC-Lavalin, but he did not specifically say he was sorry. And this was something that was notably absent after the stories we'd all done about expecting an act of contrition. And our colleague Amanda Connolly called him on that and asked him this question. Take a listen to this.
Are you apologizing for anything today?
I will be making an Inuit apology this afternoon, but in regards to standing up for jobs and defending the integrity of our rule of law, I continue to say that there was no inappropriate pressure.
So there you go. That's not changing. No inappropriate pressure, really boiling this down to a strong disagreement and some intense misunderstandings. If I can summarize it as they don't do the wrong thing, they just sometimes do it in the wrong way. But what's interesting, if you look at this, him talking about a communications breakdown and an erosion in trust, it's very similar to what we heard from Jerry Butts when he testified. That was sort of the narrative he put out there, taking the blame for an erosion of trust between him and Jody Wilson-Raybould, and that's what led to this entire problem.
The Prime Minister also offered some clarity on one of those key meetings, that key September meeting with Jody Wilson-Raybould. Yeah. What did the Prime Minister offer? Yeah,
he gave his side of this. We've heard her version of this. We've heard Michael Wernick's version of this. We've not yet heard a fulsome explanation from the Prime Minister of this. And this is a critical September 17th meeting where he spoke with Jody Wilson-Raybould. Primarily, they're talking about Indigenous issues, but SNC-Lavalin came up. And this is where she said the Prime Minister crossed the line by raising political concerns by saying, look, there's an election in Quebec. I'm an MP from Quebec. I'm the member for Papineau. Well, he conceded today for the first time that this was true. He did raise those political concerns, but he said, I wasn't worried about my job. I was worried about SNC jobs. And if you listen to his explanation of what happened that day and then put it in the context of everything that happened afterwards, he's really pointing to that conversation as a start of a misunderstanding that had real political consequences. Take a listen to this.
I said to her that I was preoccupied by the number of jobs involved in this in Quebec and obviously across the country. This is something that I was clear on, and then I asked her, even though I heard that she had made a decision, she indicated to me that she had made a decision. I asked her if she could revisit that decision, if she was open to considering, to looking at it once again, and she said that she would.
So she said that she would. After that, Trudeau insists Jody Wilson-Raybould never told him directly or never got to him through her conversations with his staff that she was not changing her mind and this matter was closed. So his staff kept asking her about it. He says he didn't realize until her testimony of last week, when they got the first full account of exactly what her concerns were, that she found all of this inappropriate. In his view, it was all a misunderstanding as he tried to protect jobs here in the country, which has been their argument, and she was standing up for her interpretation of how the law was supposed to go.
So what are the next steps for the government?
Yeah, the next steps is he's got to find a way to get up north. The storm is stopping him, so he can't do his apology. But the going forward steps here from the government is a series of external reviews. We don't know exactly who's going to do it, but they're going to look at a number of things. They're going to look at the dual role of the Justice Minister and the Attorney General, which has become a very live issue throughout this conversation, and whether they should split that up. I sense that they probably will. The other things they're going to look at is get someone from the outside to look at how his office and the Prime Minister's office interacts with other departments and with Cabinet. Clearly, there was a breakdown here in some fashion. Depending on which version of events you believe, it led to a very bad political outcome for them. They want to take a look at that and try to reassure Canadians that their institutions are working, their government is working, and despite 2 Cabinet resignations and the loss of his principal secretary, everything's actually okay. We'll see if it works.
David Cochrane, thank you for your time today.
Every conversation that was had was obviously focused on the well-being of Canadians. It is our responsibility to ensure that we're doing everything we can to protect jobs, to grow our economy, to ensure that pensioners and workers are protected, and that's something that my job and my team take very, very seriously. Every step of the way, however, we are careful to ensure that we are respecting our institutions and indeed the integrity of the justice system.
Tomorrow, we enter the 5th week since the SNC-Lavalin controversy first appeared in the Globe and Mail. That paper reported that former Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybould was inappropriately pressured to help SNC-Lavalin avoid prosecution. Justin Trudeau continues to deny that he and his government exerted any political pressure on Wilson-Raybould. Will his remarks today do anything to quell the crisis? Here to weigh in once again is Jamie Watt, the executive chairman of Navigator Limited and an expert in crisis communication. He joins us from Toronto right now. Jamie, thank you very much for your time today. I want to ask you, did the Prime Minister's comments do anything to stamp out this political crisis?
You know, Katie, I was, when I watched them this morning, I just was really disappointed. I thought that the Prime Minister had a tremendous opportunity today. I thought he had Canadians tuning in to hear him say that he was sorry, and not to dissect this, not to do the forensics, but to say, look, it doesn't matter who said what to whom and when it happened or whatever, but, you know, things didn't work out as they should have. Things went wrong. You know, we made a bit of a mess of this, and I'm the leader, and I'm going to take responsibility, and I am sorry. And I think if he had done that, you know, he would have been in a much better place tonight. You know, Jerry Butts, I thought, was tremendous yesterday. I thought he did a really good job, and many people said he put off a trial balloon for the Prime Minister. And I was left thinking today, what if instead of using Mr. Butts' testimony as a trial balloon, the Prime Minister's office and the Prime Minister himself had used it as a springboard today? And I think we would be getting to see the end of this 5 weeks of this nonsense and not having it continue on and on and on.
Yesterday, and you sort of alluded to this, but yesterday you said on this program that Justin Trudeau needed to apologize and he couldn't use any conditional language around that. He didn't do that. So what do you make of the words that he did choose?
Again, I don't know what happens when people get to Ottawa. I don't know what, and I'm sorry because I know you're there, but whether it's in the air or whether it's in the water or whether it's when you get off the highway, that all of a sudden people forget how to talk to each other. And I just always think in these things, you know, if I did something that upset my neighbor or whatever, you know, how would I make it right? I'd go and ring the doorbell and say I was sorry. I wouldn't use this kind of wishy-washy, prevaricating language. I wouldn't drag my father randomly in it. It just seemed very odd. And I think it's too bad because this Prime Minister has, as part of his persona and part of his contract with the Canadian people, he's the kind of guy that can say he's sorry and not diminish his authority, not diminish his leadership or whatever. We've had other Prime Ministers, like other men that we know in our lives, that wouldn't say sorry to save their life. But that's not Justin Trudeau. And I think, to me, what happened today was 2 things. On the substantive basis, he didn't do the job he needed to do. But secondly, he really missed a crucial opportunity with the Canadian people. He should have trusted them.
You sort of alluded to this just with your answer right there, but when the Prime Minister gets up at the National Press Theatre and says look, there was an erosion of trust within the government, when he kind of invokes that kind of language and says and doesn't say sorry, how does that play with everyday Canadians who maybe aren't in Ottawa and aren't following these stories as closely as the people on Parliament Hill?
Well, you know, it was interesting because a few weeks ago I said that the Prime Minister should make this statement either from his own office or from the National Press Theatre, that he should use the images of statecraft that are available to him, not to do it as a scrub, not to do it in a casual setting. So I thought when he agreed to do this, and secondly, when he agreed to jam it into his day at a very unusual time because of other commitments he had, that, you know, he was really setting this up to make that very clear apology. And to come right up to the edge and not do it, I just don't think average hardworking Canadians have any truck or trade with that.
You mentioned that he invoked the memory of his father. What do you make of the Prime Minister doing that?
Honestly, I still don't know what to make of it. It's not something that he talks about very much. In fact, when I have heard him speak about his father in previous times, it's to say that he's different from him, and he's gone to some considerable efforts and not to be just his father's son, but to be his own person. And where this came from, I really don't know. I do agree with Minister Qualtrough and a number of the points that she said. I don't agree at the first part of your interview with her. I think she's just dead wrong on the extent of his apology. But she is right that the system worked. I mean, for heaven's sakes, the chairman or the chair of SNC-Lavalin is a former clerk of the Privy Council. And even with all of that in this country, that pressure didn't work. That is something, that he could have taken more pride in and extended the apology just the same.
If we flip the script here and say he did apologize, would it really help the Prime Minister at this point, or is he just too far deep in this?
No, I actually think, I've made a career of betting on the reasonableness and the decency of Canadian people. Let's just think about it from our own personal lives. When you're just mad as hell at somebody and you've got a big lecture and you want to scream at them, and what do they say? Before you can even get going, they say back to you, look, I'm really sorry. Will you forgive me for that? I didn't mean to. I regret it. And then you go, blah, 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 blah. And then you can't... We're programmed to accept people's apologies. That's what we do. We do that individually, and we do that as a people. I think, honestly, everything I know, I don't think the polls and the ups and downs in the polls are needed to be permanent. I think they're transitory. And I think if he just acted for once as a normal person and not as a politician, if he wrote and spoke from his heart, not from speaking points, he would have done a lot better off today. I think he had that opportunity.
So what do the Liberals do to move past this?
Well, again, they're going to have these reviews. That's something that we all do in crisis management. We defend with process. We always have in our bag of tricks, the third-party review, the review by the retired Chief Justice or Justice of the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeal. These are techniques that are well known. But, sometimes, Katie, you have a North Star, and a leader has a North Star. Sometimes a CEO has to say, I don't need any advice on this. This is what we're going to do. And she's clear on it. She says, you know what? I don't need to consult with anybody. I know what's the right thing to do, and she takes that action. And I think that's, again, a missed opportunity today. Do we really need all these third-party reviews? Doesn't the government and the Prime Minister have a North Star that's telling them what to do?
Last question to you really quickly. Is this a situation where if the Prime Minister had just come out and just said sorry, that he would be in such a better position this afternoon than he is right now?
I believe that, and not only do I believe that, that is my experience in my work every day, that is what cauterizes it, that's what puts it to bed. And when you don't do that, it's going to be chirp, 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 chirp from a whole bunch of actors and a whole bunch of stakeholders who now don't look unreasonable. Had he said sorry, had he put it to bed, then all those people, beacon off about it would have been the ones that would have looked unreasonable. People would say, come on, the guy said sorry. Have you not made a mistake yourself? Leave it. Let's get on with things. But he didn't do that.
Jamie Watt, I want to say thank you for your time today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.